All right, we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Blacks in Technology, the Tech Life, or presents the Tech Life Getting Hired series. Thank you for tuning in. If you ever wonder what it takes to get hired at some of the top tech companies like Google, Apple, Salesforce, Amazon, SAP, what skills do you need to succeed? What's the interview process like, and how should your resume be crafted? Well, tonight you're going to find out. And Blacks in Technology proudly presents the Tech Life Getting Hired, a Google Hangout web series event that will answer those very questions. I'm your host tonight, Greg Greenlee. I thought we were going to be or have our co-host, Dr. Danielle Smith, but she may not be able to make it. So I'll be steering this whole thing tonight. So during this web series event, we're going to sit down with people from all aspects of the technology industry, from engineers to HR, business analysts to hiring managers. Tonight, senior VP, and some of the top tech companies in the world for a practical discussion on getting hired. And just in case you haven't read our blog and you're wondering why do a series called Getting Hired, well, since starting the Blacks in Technology organization, I have the opportunity to talk to hundreds, if not thousands, of our members. And I've listened to their stories about what it's like living in tech, from starting companies to going on interviews to working and living in different environments. So the Tech Life is our effort to showcase those stories in a more cohesive way. So the first video installment of this Tech Life series will be Getting Hired. So we'll be featuring men and women, or black men and women in tech that are working for larger, higher profile companies such as Google, Apple, Salesforce, etc. And we did this intentionally to provide some attention to a side of tech that, while popular, is often overlooked in a lot of conversations. And our goal here is to have a candid discussion with our participants and have them provide our community with practical and actionable advice that will aid our members in becoming world-class technology professionals. So this video series will serve as a valuable and informational resource for members in our community. So listen, take notes, ask questions. If you're tuning in on YouTube right now, I think there is a section where you can ask questions, but if I'm not able to get to them, just give us a tweet at Black in Technology, and that's BLKINTECHNOLOGY. And check us out on the internet at www.blacksintechnology.net. So the topics that we're going to cover a wide variety of them. Basically assist our community with career planning and progression. So those topics would include personal advice, skill development, resume tips, interview strategies, and touch on what's expected of you once you start and move up the ladder. So this point, the portion of this Tech Life series as a whole is to raise the profile of people of color outside of the startup community. We're not going to forget those people. We're going to come back with another Tech Life series for them. But this Getting Hired series is going to highlight career options in traditional corporations, hopefully serving as a career development resource for those in the Blacks in Technology community that are curious about this route. I would like to thank our sponsors at Salesforce developers, and I want to mention Trailhead X. And it's one of the most, it's a must-attend conference of the year for Salesforce developers. It happens June 28th and 29th in San Francisco, where you can get hands-on and explore 120 plus technical sessions with learning paths for beginners, intermediate, and advanced trailblazers. Salesforce engineers, scientists, and product leaders will be your guide on a path of discovery and adventure. At Trailhead X, you'll learn about the latest Salesforce technologies, meet other makers, and have fun along the way. So visit developer.salesforce.com/trailheadx, and that's TRAILHEADX, to register with early bird pricing. All right, so we're going to get into the Q&A session. I want to introduce our guest tonight, Brian Reaves. Brian Reaves is a senior vice president within SAP's Office of the CEO organization and leads the diversity and inclusion initiative for the organization, which includes the chief executive officer, chief marketing officer, global head of strategy and business development, chief digital officer, Global Head of Corporate Affairs and Global Head of Partner Operations. In his current role, Brian is focused on the development and implementation of D&I strategies and tactics that will drive sustainable business success and will ultimately position SAP as a global employer of choice for all demographic groups. He is a co-founder of the SAP's Black Employee Network and worked closely with the University Alliances organization to create a strategic diversity initiative called Project Propel, which enables historically Black colleges and universities to empower their students and professionals with knowledge of the latest SAP technologies to better prepare them with critical digital enterprise skills in demand by SAP customers, and SAP partners. Over the past 30 years, Brian has held senior executive software development and management roles in a number of industries and technology sectors. He began his career as a software developer at Xerox Corporation, and his passions include international travel, professional and amateur sports, and he holds a BS in mathematics and computer science from UCLA, and he grew up in South Central Los Angeles. So we want to welcome Brian to the show. Brian, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks, Greg. I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. We definitely appreciate that. So we're going to get started with questions. Our first question tonight is, tell us a little bit about your job and describe your average workday and your key responsibilities.
Yeah, as you spoke about a little bit in the bio there, working at SAP, it's a tremendous company. A little bit about SAP first, and then I'll lead into the craziness that goes on day to day. Okay. A lot of people don't know a lot about SAP. We're the second largest software company in the world, obviously, and the largest enterprise software company in the world. Microsoft being the largest software company in the world. I have about 86,000 employees located in about 160 countries. We've got customers in 190 countries. We have 300,000 plus customers, I should say, across 25 industries and 11 lines of business. So the net of all of that is that pretty much anyone listening here, whether you're in tech or not tech, we employ talent such as yours. But we have close to about 90% of the Global 2000 as customers, do about 25 billion in revenue each year, have about $118 billion market cap, which this week we hit our sort of all-time stock high, so it's pretty amazing. And about 76% of the world's transaction revenue goes through an SAP system. So the net is, a lot of big company, very, very successful company, exciting company to be around, because we've disrupted ourselves as we've moved from on-premise to cloud technology. So that was a little sales pitch for everybody out there. Check out SAP. In a typical day, I mean, literally in my role, I'm an engineer by trade, as you spoke about, and I actually took the role in diversity and inclusion, quite honestly, because of passion. It's been sort of the side job because of my background. I think others should have opportunities in tech, because it could be not only career changing but life changing. It certainly changed the life not only of myself but my family and many others around us. So on a particular day in diversity and inclusion, so since I come at it a little bit different than some traditional folks, I've got like 5 things going on at a given time. Some of the things are very, very targeted at driving diversity and inclusion related topics within the office of the CEO, making sure that we're doing what we need to do to lead from the front. Some of the things that we do, that I do, is focused on, coaching the next generation of SAP leaders. And in that, sprinkling in their mind that inclusion is a significant part of their current and future success. I spend a lot of time, doing things like working with things like Project Propel to build that diverse talent pool for SAP, not only as early talent coming in, but also trying to drive at the professional and executive levels to get talent of color into SAP, since it's such a great company. So when I'm not traveling, I do, writing. I need to get a lot more social on Twitter. I don't know if I'm that interesting, but I will become better at it, quite honestly. But there's lots of meetings, whether they're Skype or other types of meetings to drive topics. Each day, I'm trying to actually do something to move the company forward on this topic and every other topic. And then to get that little analytical, sort of buzz, if you will, I spend a lot of time diving into the data to support many of the actions and tactics that we'll take in D&I. And then finally, the great part of my week is actually mentoring a lot of people, both in and outside of SAP, as well as acting as a coach and sponsor for many.
Excellent, excellent. Don't get sucked into Twitter.
Yeah,
it can be.
I don't want to read about anyway.
It can be a full-time job in itself.
I can hear it, man. I hear you.
But that's an excellent, excellent overview of your day-to-day life there at SAP. Let's take a little bit, a step back just a little bit, and tell us how you actually. How you got started in technology, but tell us a little bit about your educational background,
Sure.
How you became interested in technology as a whole, and then what jobs and experiences led you to your current position.
Yeah, no, going back, I mean, I can still remember it. I mean, I went into UCLA, and that was a dream. I mean, to be able to sort of go to college. I mean, my mom, single parent home, growing up in a neighborhood where, quite honestly, the vast majority of people, either it was the gang life, the drug life, pimp life, and all of that was around. And the only thing that, quite honestly, kept me out of that was probably the fear that my mom and grandmother would kill me, because they're going to kill me before the streets did. So it was an honor and a privilege to sort of represent, the family and get into UCLA. And the way I came about, I was always good at math. But this is back in the day. So for all you guys, I'm gonna talk about mainframe computers and all this other stuff. Maybe a few of you guys know what those things are, if not, see a museum. But that was, early computing, if you would. I mean, and I remember my first, comp sci class, comp sci 20, and I had an assignment, and you were supposed to go to the lab and sort of program, and back then it was assembler. And I remember going in about 6 o'clock in the evening after dinner. I had my little ritual, study up and get to the lab. And I thought maybe 2 or 3 hours had gone by. But when I left, I was wondering what was going on campus. It was a little quiet. It was about 3 in the morning, and I'd actually not even gotten up to hit the restroom. And it was that moment, I still remember it. I was 17 years old at that time. But I was like, I can do this, especially if they're saying they pay you money to do stuff like that. So, so that sparked that interest. Graduated in 85, but in 82, that summer after my freshman year, I had an opportunity to do an internship at the Southern California Gas Company, doing a little bit of programming, these macros and this technology back there called Lotus 123 back in the day. And then that led to the following summer, Xerox showing up on campus and getting an opportunity to intern at Xerox. So in 1983, I actually started as an intern in Xerox, part-time during the school year, full-time in summers, and in that summer being able to come out to the legendary Park Xerox and seeing some of the most amazing technology, the amazing technologists there. And again, that just confirmed that that this was the life for me, that this was what I was going to do in my career. So fast forward over that career, I spent 9 years at Xerox. I then got a little bit of an entrepreneurial bug. My uncle had been in the Valley at Apple Computer. My aunt was at HP, and they were saying, something's going on here. You need to get here. So I joined a consulting firm that moved me from, at that time, I was living on the East Coast, coming back to the Bay Area, and ended up, quite honestly, starting my own consulting company and turning that into my first startup. So I actually spent about 14 years in the Valley, sort of as doing startups, as an executive. I was the CEO of one that was sold off. Also doing turnarounds for VCs, which is pretty exciting. And that's how literally I got to SAP. SAP acquired the technology from one of the startups I was leading the engineering and cloud operations organizations for. And they asked if I wanted to join. My first answer was no. I mean, I really enjoy, after 14 years of sort of the grind, but it's addictive of the Valley and doing startups. I said, I finally said, well, I'll do a year. And here I am in year 9. It's been an exceptional ride for all the reasons I talked about before. An amazing company, a company that is disrupting itself and allowing me to get my hands on next generation technology, and then now do something very, very passionate around diversity and inclusion.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for taking us through your journey up to SAP. And it's funny you mentioned Xerox, and a lot of the younger people who may be watching or tuning in, they don't know how much of a pioneer the Xerox company was at the time. they might think that they only do copiers and and things like that, and printers nowadays, but they were. I mean, people stole from them. That's just
absolutely, man. I saw the first.
Everyone stole from Xerox.
No, you're right. My first computer was a Star workstation, which was the precursor from the Mac. If we had executed on that, there wouldn't be probably Apple, or Apple would be something totally different. Sort of Ethernet, the mouse. I mean, all this tech. Sadly, and I'm sorry if anybody was listening from Xerox. This is painful for all of us. I still, feel that is home. We just didn't do a good job of taking that innovation and getting it to market. We allowed at that time folks who are more financially concerned, sort of concerned at looking at financial and the guaranteed bet versus betting on technology and innovation, which is a story that plays out over and over, for those companies that have success and those who don't make it. So you're absolutely right. Some amazing things. They should be bigger than IBM, and they should, sort of companies like even HP in the copier business. If SAP or if Xerox had executed, they would be much bigger than anybody and everybody in the industry.
Exactly. So, so you told us about your lead up to your current position, or lead up to SAP, and so. So we learned a little bit about how you got started at SAP. So kind of take us through the stages of your climb to senior vice president. Tell us a little bit, how you heard about the opportunity, what, how were the stages of interviews, to get to this position. If you could give us a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time actually when SAP acquired the technology. It was around late 2008. Early 2009, and as everybody may remember back then, that was in the midst of the .com crash, so a lot of crazy stuff was going on. But at that time, SAP was hell-bent on their belief that the cloud was the future, and they needed to sort of accelerate that. And we did so, not only from that technology, but through some acquisitions, which now again have put us on a great path. But that said, when I came in, so it was very interesting because they said, well, come in, but we don't hand out, this title, sort of thing. We're really conservative about it, especially in this time when we're cutting back and we're conservative. So I came in actually as a senior director to SAP in 2009, but the comp was right. So I've never been, quite honestly, hung up on titles. They certainly, if you earn the right to have one, you should have it. But in this case, I was pretty confident that some of the mindset, this pure cloud mindset that I was bringing in, would be valuable, and if I did the things that I expected I would be able to do, that SAP would value that, and and promotions would come. So I've never had an interview in SAP. I mean, that I could talk about previous interviews, and we can get back to that. I certainly have points of view on that. And interviewing lots of other people, but opportunities just keep coming. And over a 4-year period, I moved from the senior director to a vice president, then a global vice president, and then a senior vice president. And that's not to be arrogant about it. It's just that SAP tends to recognize talent. It's the type of company where, if your core competence and passion align, and, you really, get outside of your normal job and really show that you can move things forward, good things can happen to you in the company. And I was fortunate enough to have people recognize that. So whether, I started out running this sort of cloud platform for SAP around, this next generation technology. Then that took me into the analytics field, which going back to my math background, always like that. So I was a COO in that group. Then we were really accelerating our opportunities and thoughts about design thinking, and we were starting some new innovation in some new areas. So I got an opportunity to lead development and project management, product management, cloud operations for some new solutions in sports and healthcare and in retail, which is really cool. And then that sort of led to being and earning the right to be able to ask for this opportunity and position myself for this opportunity in diversity and inclusion. And if I step back, I mean, I always believe that if someone shows a mastery of their scope of responsibility while positioning themselves for upward mobility by expanding that skill set, good things that'll happen. And I also think of myself as a brand. A lot of young folks that I talk to, the goddaughters and others, about the importance of looking at yourself as a brand. And like every brand, that brand can increase or decrease in value every day. So personally, my approach to work every day, no matter where you are, what title, what hierarchy, is to increase my brand value every day. And then, the test of that brand each year is the upward mobility that comes every couple of years. So that's sort of the philosophy around how I look at movement and movement through organizations.
Excellent advice there. So, and you talked about this. You had a few senior leadership roles at SAP. Tell us a little bit about the process for each, how the process for your current role now differs from some of the others, and then tell us about the mentors, the people that kind of helped you out along the way, and how did you approach people to be mentors?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I look at whether I'm doing it in the tech side of SAP or now, I try to be consistent, because I do think that there are some fundamentals that are constant when you're leading. I think number one, to truly lead, you must have willing followers, and followers don't mean who's in an org chart. In fact, in fact, those are some of the worst leaders, those that believe that when you assume power, those who report to you will follow you. That's a false narrative, I believe. And so, and followers become willing followers if they trust you, because I think most things are rooted in trust, especially if people, they're not family and they don't know you. You have to establish some level of trust, and the foundation of trust for me, are and I think people evaluate my leadership, and many leaders' leadership. Are you honest? Do you have appropriate confidence? Are you committed? Do you have the right attitude? Are you creative? Do you have the ability to inspire them and to delegate, not just to sit there over them? And then how do you approach complex problems and situations, both in the work and outside the work? Critical conversations, that type of thing. So now that philosophy for me, you asked who are my mentors, and I've been very fortunate to observe and then have direct interaction with a number of people. Some come, I remember there's a brother who was pretty famous. He's passed, God bless him. His name was Frank Green, and he was one of the early investors in one of my startups. And Frank had tremendous success. He was a scientist among scientists, made some money, Slack, and went into being a VC, one of the first Black venture capitalists. And watching Frank and listening to him about how to conduct myself as a CEO of a company, how people would look at me, and how not to, sort of fall into the traps of, you're at the top of the heap now, and now these certain things could or may not or potentially could happen, and I appreciate that. I spoke earlier about my uncle Al. He was early in this valley as well, and always keeping humble there. My current sort of boss, our CEO, Bill McDermott, tremendously inspiring. He's got a wonderful book people should definitely read called Winner's Dream, that talks about the mindset of sort of always putting the customer or others first, and how you deal with things. So you could have your formal mentors, but I informally just observe what I believe to be great leadership. And then engage those individuals. Just, people are open to share. That's the one thing. A lot of people are scared to go to individuals because they don't know, if they're asking something that's out of band. What I find is, good leaders are always open to share, because they know that, whatever wisdom that they've gained, they are willing and honored to pass it forward. So I will, obviously tell people always try to find mentors, and mentors are for different things. One mentor doesn't fit all. If you have particular area that you want to grow in, find someone who has mastered that. So you might end up with a lot of different mentors. You'll have less sponsors, people who will be in a room and will say, hey, Greg, Brian, I will vouch for that individual, and they'll shepherd you along. Also get some reverse mentoring. Take some, folks who you mentor. You can learn as much. I learn as much from my mentees as I give, which is why I like doing it, because they have fresh perspectives, especially a lot of the early talent there. It helps me tap into other individuals that might be from their demographics. So that's a lot to your question there, but I hope that was helpful.
No, that's excellent. One of the things that really caught me that you said was about having different mentors for different things. I think when people have this notion of a mentor, they think of just one person that knows all and is going to be that go-to person for everything. So mentioning that maybe you have a mentor for the technical side, maybe there's a mentor for the leadership side of things. I think that's very valuable information for our audience. So,
and the one that I always, and it sort of gets left out, but you're right. I mean, some of the hard quote unquote skills that we have, you have your tech, and then certainly the leadership. But the one I really, some of the mentors I've had that have helped with storytelling. I mean, for me, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit later about in an interview what people are looking for. Certainly, what I would look for is you have to tell your story, and there's an effective way to do it. I know so many people who are so sort of brilliantly talented inside the head, but when they open the mouth, it never comes out and represents them to the fullest. And some of the best coaching that I've ever received was around storytelling. It's like someone asks you a question, that's an opportunity not only for you to answer exactly the thing that they ask, but to sort of phrase it in a way that makes them think beyond what they asked you, which then turns an interview into a conversation, which we can talk about later. And that's the goal, is to get into a conversation, not to be interviewed or to interview someone else, but to get into a conversation about not what is, but what is possible.
Yeah, that's excellent. I know I run across quite a few people just interacting with the membership a bit where a person is struggling with the job, or they may be struggling with interviews and things like that. So that's good advice, and for them to know about, and maybe that's something that they can seek out in their mentor, their choice for mentor. Excellent. So we talked about mentors for you throughout your journey. Do you have any other resources that you utilize for, I guess, kind of, I don't want to say building your skill set, but just to give you a little bit more knowledge about, leadership? Like, are there books that you read? Are there blogs that you go and read? If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, TED Talks, I mean, there's some amazing content all over. I mean, in fact, I can not do my job and every day go on the web and learn something. But there's a lot of sort of TED Talks out there. There's a great book called Drive that years ago, his name's Daniel Pink, that I read, and it really resonated with me because it talked about 3 concepts to being successful. And those being sort of mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And I always harken back, and I would suggest that as a sort of, it's an easy read. But it really gets to at least for me, it resonates with the core of what are the sort of the elements or the dimensions of my core that I need to have when I look at different issues or as I go through in my career. I talked about Winner's Dream, and then but there's literally in the TED Talks, there's all kinds of great people, and I don't do it just for tech, because again, I think a T-shaped person is what we call them in SAP. I mean, what I want to do is to be able to sort of master certain things, but I also want to have the ability to sort of horizontally move and expand and then master. So it's that constant sort of horizontal and vertical. And quite honestly, that's how most careers will go. I mean, you'll go up, and then many times you might have to sort of go and expand a bit before you can find the rise up. Some people think that it sends you to straight up or it's some steep incline, but quite honestly, what I found, it's one of these things as you move up, and in order to get those additional sort of experiences, you just have to sort of to challenge yourself, ask for stretch assignments, do things constantly to challenge yourself along the way to be better.
Excellent. And so, with that being said, what are some of the best ways for potential candidates to kind of demonstrate that they have the necessary skills and experiences for the position for one or like the one you currently have?
Yeah, I'll answer too, because I'll also do the tech ones. I know your audience there. So, for my current experience, I mean, quite honestly, a lot of it comes down to I'm not the traditional diversity and inclusion sort of person. No disrespect, many of the people come from HR, and I think they're more process oriented. I view the problem, and you observe like any other engineering problem. You sort of observe what the truth is, try to understand the elements that make it that truth, and then if you want to sort of change the outcome, you must change the environment around it. And for SAP, tactically, when you look at great company, of course there's unconscious bias, all the things that sort of sit out there. But again, I don't feed into that. The reality is we aren't going where talent of color resides, and talent of color doesn't know about us. So, having tactics and strategies to bridge that gap. And then once people get into SAP, surrounding them with people who help them sort of ascend is very important. And that's why a few of us started the Black Employee Network, and there's a Latinos at SAP and other groups sort of like that. As far as the types of things that and skills and experiences people might have in general, maybe for an engineering job, is there's always the tactical nature of what you need. So if you're going, whether you're doing something in machine learning, or you're doing something as a data scientist, or a software developer or a designer or what have you, you need to come to the table with some level of core competence. Now, some managers, SAP is an 86,000 person, sort of company. So expectations vary amongst the mindset of a hiring manager. But for me, I hire for, have you demonstrated in some way, doesn't have to be everything that the job description says, but have you demonstrated some core element that I can believe that you have the potential to master that at some point? And quite honestly, when you step in SAP, regardless of what you learned in school or somewhere else, we're going to teach you a little bit, it's going to be very, very additional knowledge that's going to come to make it relevant to what we're trying to do. There's no pure, it's not like we're some science company where it's sort of pure research. This is very, very practical. So that's number one. Number two is I also am looking, I talked about the T-shaped again, for individuals who, when I ask a question, they might only be able to, I'm looking to give me a pertinent example of how you would solve that problem. Even if you've never solved it before, what's your thought process with regards to how you will approach that? And for those things that you don't know, I would like to hear from you, what you're going to do to sort of close that gap in the near term and the long term, and how you go about that. And I think those are the skills in an interview situation or any conversation. If you can convince that individual that not only are you competent and you know how to solve problems in a very logical way, but you also have the ability to learn, and you have that ability to do what's necessary to be the best at that job, and even to sort of take that particular problem to another level, or get a solution that's at another level, and that's where that storytelling comes in. So talk to me about what you know, but also sort of inspire me with what could be as opposed to what is.
Excellent, excellent. I think it's very important what you expounded on, because you see a lot of when it comes to job requirements, for instance, and there's studies out here that'll back this up. But basically, there's a study that says when it comes to like minorities and women, they have like a certain they feel that they need to have a certain percentage of the skills on the job, or as far as the job requirements, than a white male counterpart does. So it's important, you mentioned about, it's not important that you have every single skill that's listed, or that you have the correct answer, or the answer about everything, but your thought process behind that, or whether or not you think you can master a certain skill and things like that. So I think that's very important for people to hear and understand.
And then the research going into it. I also look for, quite honestly, a lot of people fall in the trap. I went to an Ivy League school, or I went to MIT. No disrespect, fantastic, great, you got that degree. But people think that the resume or the credentials that come from a certain school are the story, but it's never, that's not the story for me. So that's great that you got in, and that tells me that, if your GPA is good, maybe you studied well, but that's just table stakes to get into a conversation. Tell me about what you're going to do, once you get here. Why why you versus anyone else? And I really want to, what I think and hope that certainly people of color can bring is that hustle, right? I mean, just the life story of what it took to even get to that point, I value, and in my job as in D&I try to get others to value that as well. It's like, do you know what it actually took for this individual to get where they are versus someone who may have been anointed or who may have had privilege? I mean, that's who you want with you in the battle. When something's going right, you can have anybody with you. When something's going wrong, you want people who will be willing to do anything to help move the story towards success. And in the end, those are the intangible skills that certainly going back to my first Xerox interview, I just had a couple of, sort of programming classes in this other internship. And that, I'm talking to these brilliant people and they're talking about, teaching me artificial intelligent languages, which I knew a little bit. I'd done my research and know that this is what Lisp was something that was happening in the park. But I convinced that individual that, hey, I might not know Lisp, but there's going to be nobody better by the end of this summer at this. And this is what the work I'm willing to put in to be there. And quite honestly, people will resonate with that. I mean, the right type of manager. Quite honestly, someone looking for the checks and boxes, that's probably not someone who's going to help grow your career either. So learn from the experience, move on.
Excellent, excellent. For those that are watching, if you just joined us, we are speaking with Brian Reaves, Senior Vice President at SAP. We just got finished talking about, what kind of what the skills that he would be looking for and some of the intangibles. I want to talk about some of, I guess, the tangibles, like how important for a candidate, how important is their resume, and what makes a resume impressive, and is a work portfolio needed? What do you look for as far as the web presence, the LinkedIn, GitHub, things like that?
Great question. Yeah, it's kind of funny now because all resumes almost look the same. So there must be some website, resume.com, where you can take a template and create it. So though they are necessary, buzzword compliant. Quite honestly, the differentiator is elsewhere for me. So at a minimum, I'll get the resume and all the right stuff's in all the right places, which is great. But a strong enhancement for me to a resume is a cover letter, a strong cover letter, because that's where in prose you can articulate why I or someone should hire you and why you believe you're the best candidate for the position. So I'm always saddened when I get a resume and there's no cover letter that's very, very directed at the position that they're going for, because otherwise it looks like everybody else. That's a way to differentiate. Also, LinkedIn is, that's replaced. In fact, we suck the resume. In fact, when you apply for an SAP job, we don't ask for your resume. We ask for your LinkedIn profile, and we've got something that'll suck out all of the metadata that we need, because that's how, quite honestly, irrelevant resumes are starting to get. So I think what's important for me when I look at LinkedIn, it's an opportunity for individuals, again, to give me that extra dimension of information. And quite honestly, for me, to get some insights into the various connections that you have as an individual. Many times, I actually look at the connections and I go and indirectly seek references ahead of the formal engagement process, because I want to know about you. And if someone that you put as a connection, so watch who you connect with, by the way, it can speak to, very, very effectively speak to, you before I ever see you and tell me about you. So that's very important. For developers, referencing examples of your work, whether it's GitHub or otherwise, is very, very powerful, because again, it just shows that you are out there and that you're not afraid to share your code with a very unforgiving community at times, which is good, because you want folks to challenge you. But the goal, again, in the resume and the cover letter or your LinkedIn profile or GitHub or whatever, is to get the opportunity to engage and highlight and differentiate yourself in person. And so do what's required to get there, but the resume for me is like that's table stakes, and all of them are starting to look the same to me.
Excellent, excellent. So let's talk a little bit about the interview process, and we don't have to go too in depth. Just give us a general overview of what an interview process may look like at SAP. Are there phone screens, or are there one-on-one interviews, or are there multiple rounds? If you can expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, SAP, what I find is pretty traditional in its interview process. We've got a talent acquisition organization that's part of HR, and their whole goal, whether you're coming in as early talent, fresh out of school or graduate school, versus a professional level or executive level, that early talent will engage you and they'll do sort of the pre-screen, if you would, just to make sure that there's an overall fit. And some of those are cultural fit, behavioral types of things. Once sort of because they are the sort of representing the hiring manager's wishes. They've been told what that person is generally looking for. The next few interviews are typically done over the phone with professionals related to the role. It might be a peer that you might have, or maybe someone that's a little bit more senior, but someone who knows the role well. And that individual is really looking to test some of the a more fit and finish, but very, very practically about the role. So if you're going to be a developer, you talk to a developer, and they probably checking your mindset. What's your approach to the development of software? What's your approach, quite honestly, in SAP to empathy for end users, which is real big. In fact, if you want to fail an interview, I don't care how smart you are, if you don't mention the end user and who you're actually developing for, you probably won't make it to the next round. Just a little sort of clue there from our development folks. Some of the development candidates at that point, if it's a Skype interview or something remote, you might actually get a coding problem or some sort of test and sort of ahead. And the business candidates could even get a quick, hey, here's, come back to me in the second, in a day. Here's a little business case. How would you think through that problem? Just they were testing for some logical thinking. Then at that point, you typically do come in and, they'll either fly you in or you can go to a local office. And the next round, the third round, if you would, are a series of in-person. Some of those could be, depending on your role, if it's consulting or sales, it might be a group interview. Developers, it could be a group interview, or you get multiples there. But in there, sometime during that time, especially if you're flying in, you'll get an opportunity to pass on to the hiring manager. And then the relationship gets turned back to talent acquisition, who sort of keeps you abreast of what's going on. So it's pretty typical, in that manner. That's how I would think about it at SAP, at least.
Excellent. And thanks for that little nugget there about empathy for the end user. For people who didn't catch that, lock that in your memory banks if you plan on. I think that's important for anybody at any company that's offering a service to their end users. That's very important, because a lot of people tend to forget that. They get mired in the technical aspect of it. Or they get just mired in just in their career period. They don't think about, hey, you're doing this for the customer, and we need the customer in order for the business to thrive and grow. So very, very important. Okay, so tell us a little bit about, if you can, describe how I think you kind of touched on this about how a well-qualified candidate will perform in this process, but I know you mentioned stories, like a person telling their stories. So let's go back to that and tell us a little bit about, just describe to our audience what you mean by stories, and what is your definition of someone telling a good story?
Yeah, so you might get a question about sort of. I'll give an example of, I always ask the question in an interview, tell me about a time in your experience, whether you're in school, if you're still in school, or if you have a career in your career, when something is going wrong. I mean, where you're really feeling as though it's probably the worst day of your professional career or worst day of your early career. What's happening? What happened, and what is happening at that time, and how do you deal with it? So, very open-ended question. And what I'm looking for at that point, number one, is to have someone have some level of humility. I've had people tell me, well, nothing. I've never had anything go, sort of wrong. or or everything's wrong every day. Wrong. It's quite honestly, somewhere in between where I'm trying to give you an opportunity to share, with humility, something that really does bother you in an environment where you can't be productive, and how you dealt with that situation. So the storytelling would begin with the way you describe what's going on. How much detail do you give in it? Folks who actually go in and say, I remember with specificity, this day came in, a lot of bad stuff was happening at the house. I came into the work, my boss was all over me, and I had a deliverable. I messed up the deliverable, blah, 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 where there's some level of humility in the story. And then, somehow in there, I'm looking for, so what did you learn? And, in there. So without even prompting, I want them to immediately go into, quite honestly, I took a step back. I looked at the situation and realized that these are the things that I can change immediately. These are the things I need to change over time. This is where I reached out and got some help. And, oh, by the way, that's never happened again. And here's how I grew from that experience. So there, like any other story, there's a beginning and there's a middle and there's an end. But the flow is, really diving into the, where I can sit there and think that I can go along with you, where I can picture when you're talking to me, what was happening with you, how you dealt with it. It gives me a feeling on how you might deal with tough problems, and then how you're growing from the experience. And in most stories, that's what's happening in any type of interview is, what'd you learn? How'd you grow from it? How are you going to handle this in the future? How did you grow from it? That type of situation.
Excellent, excellent. So tell us a little bit about a candidate that you thought might do well based on their initial application, and after you got them through, or got them going through the process, it didn't work out. How was that handled? How did you actually weed out that particular person?
Yeah, so there's a lot of folks who I think at universities many times it's no, I can't think of the university example and a professional example, but the university example, it's very, very clear that a number of folks, especially if they're coming out of business school, are very, very polished in their answers, and they might even have the storytelling part down. And this particular individual, Ivy League, East Coast, everybody would know the school. We were hiring for our sports, sort of team in a product management role. Well, the individual, had credentials, had done some stuff, sort of around the sports area before, in the analytics area. And early on, the people who were doing the interviews, I was sort of in the back end of the interview process, but all the feedback I was getting from this individual was, oh my God, he's great, he's done this, that, highly skilled, done some time at this very credentialed school, blah, 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 blah. So when I got to the individual, I was thinking, oh, man, this must be a home run, because these were some pretty, the folks that were doing the interviewing were pretty savvy kind of individuals. So, my first question was, and this goes back to, sort of, always putting the end user in the middle, or at the center of your story, or of the problem. And I asked individuals, well, talk to me about this project. Tell me why it was successful. And the individual went through and talked about all the things he did and the team did, but didn't mention anything about who they did it for and what the impact and the value to the customer was. They talked about the technology and the methodology, but I didn't get any feel. So I said, okay, well, maybe they missed the point there. Then I asked a subsequent question similar, but talk to me about this one. And the same thing happened. And it was at that moment that I knew it was more about, for that individual, it was more about the success of getting through a process and developing the product than being able to relate that product to value to the end customer. And that was, to me, no, especially, from a design, because we had talked about design thinking, and the person even mentioned design thinking, but they didn't ever mention empathy for the end user, in there. And for me, that's, in that type of role, if you're trying to innovate, there has to be, feasibility and viability, which this person really, sort of kind of talked about, but desirability they missed. And the intersection of all of those is rare, true, in my opinion, innovation happens. So that was, that was one where, I thought the person credentialed well, had it, but the mind wasn't right with regards to, why are you a product manager? Who are you really working for? You work for the company, or are you working for the, for the customer? And to me, it's always about the customer, because they're the ones who are paying, and those are the ones they're going to get references from, and they're the ones going to get value that you can build upon to sort of scale. So, so that's an example there.
Excellent answer. And once again, I'm glad that you mentioned about working for or doing things for the customer. I think a lot of the times that gets lost, and people tend to forget that. So excellent. So when you talk about people possibly joining SAP, and you hear a lot nowadays about culture and culture fit and things like that.
Yeah.
So tell us, how do you suggest people kind of present questions in regards to culture at a company, and what are some of the things that you that you kind of like to relay when it comes to the culture at SAP?
Yeah, that's another great question. Yeah, Greg, you're hitting it out the park, bro. Yeah, asking the culture question. So, asking if you're in an interview and you get to that point in the interview, which I hope everybody does, where you get to flip it, right? They typically, someone will ask you, do you have any questions? Again, something that saddens me is when someone's like, no, I'm good. It's like, no, you can never be good. Always be prepared to flip the conversation, because that's your invitation to turn things around in a different subject. So on that one, when that opportunity comes, asking, how's the culture of SAP, as an example, is a fair question. Now, quite honestly, in most cases, you will get a direct answer that the culture is great. And somebody, and then you can probe a little bit, and they'll give you, these platitudes about how wonderful the company is. My suggestion is, certainly ask the question and get the answer, but to vet that answer, because you do the research on the company's culture indirectly. As an example, is the company on the list of best places to work? SAP happens to be, and that's something that Fortune magazine that I hold very, very dear, because they vet pretty strenuously there. Another one is, do you have anyone in your network that is linked to someone currently or formerly employed by the company? And through your LinkedIn network or whatever other network you have, talk to those people about the culture of the company, and compare that to the answer that you have there. And if it's someone that that knows someone else, certainly go ahead and get that introduction, because it's really important for you to understand it, because this is a place that you'll have to live. It's not, believe me, I mean, I would hope that everyone aspires someday to have a career, not just a job. And if you want to have a career in a place, you're going to be there for a while, and that culture is going to be important, and you're going to add to that, hopefully, or have the ability to add positively to that. I also do a lot of research on companies that do they have public positions on topics that I feel are important to a strong culture. How does a company address situations like LGBTQ? How do companies address topics like Black Lives Matter? I mean, and it's not that they have to be out there, because companies aren't, the goal of a company is not to advocate, but does the company run away from very tough situations? Quite honestly, how is a company, and all of us are navigating around it, address the current situation in our the leadership of our country today? There's a lot of things that are happening every day, and does a company allow at SAP, we have a very strong ERG, or employee resource group culture. We have your Latinos at SAP, you have your Black Employee Network, you have our Pride at SAP, and we're doing things together now called We Are One, where we're actually have these forums that we're going around the North America, and then we'll go around the world, where we're actually, as employees, talking about these issues very authentically. And there's nobody, and all of our leadership is applauding, or like, thank you, because there's certain things we can and cannot say publicly, because that sort of will come back at the company, but they empower the employees to be their authentic selves. So those, SAP passes not only the sniff test, but deeply all of those and allows us to be us. We certainly can always improve. I want to see more of people that look like us in SAP to move that forward. But we've done things like Jazz Night as Black Employee Network, Movie Night. You show the movie Selma. There's certain companies that wouldn't even let you think about showing the movie Selma in a movie night on premises, and we've done that. We've done, they empower us to be our authentic selves because they know that will strengthen the overall culture and brand of SAP.
So, two very important things. By the way, thanks for that excellent answer. Two very important things that I took out of that. The first one was this is a conversation, right, between you. Not only are you being interviewed, but you need to actually interview the potential employer as well. And I've talked to people within the Black technology community and people who have been struggling to find jobs or maybe even struggling in the interview process. And I know it's easier said than done when you tell a person or you try to give us some advice as far as, just calm yourself down in the interview process. This is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street because you have value and skill that they are looking for as well, right? So I think it's very important that people understand that this is a two-way conversation and that people should ask, they should ask, their questions or whatever they may be, if whatever is going to make them feel comfortable with being hired by a company. And the other thing that you mentioned towards the latter part of your answer was SAP allows you to be your authentic selves. And I think that's really important because I know just from speaking with people in the community, there are a lot of people that tend to wear masks. And I know this is true, not just in the Black community, but more so with people of color. They have to wear this mask because, they're afraid to reveal who they truly are at work. And I think it's very important that a company culture provides that for their employees. And so, you don't feel alone. You don't feel like you're on an island, and you feel when you go into work, you don't have to hide and you can be free. You can be yourself. So two very important things. And, from your answer. So thanks for that.
Appreciate it.
So I got a couple more questions before we get out of here. I know that you're part of the Black Employee Network there. And I know with, you're a senior vice president there at SAP, and with great power comes great responsibility. So why is it important? Why is diversity and inclusion important to you? And not only why is it important, but why do you feel like you need to, step out in the forefront and lead this effort?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I mean, what I speak to my colleagues who may not fully understand the topic, I take it beyond the social imperative. So, there are some people who get that it is a social imperative that as human beings, inclusion makes us stronger. But more importantly, or as important, I should say, to a business, being inclusive raises the top and bottom lines of the company. It's a business imperative. And I share, as I talked about, a little bit analytical, is I typically come at it and show both from a correlation and a causation standpoint, how positively impacting it is to all of the business KPIs any company would care about, that diversity and inclusion brings to the table. So if you want a better top line and a better bottom line, these sort of tactics are as important as anything we can do from a technological innovation point of view. So for me, that's a contribution to the company and the company's bottom line, and that's how I think of diversity and inclusion. In fact, every presentation that I have at the top, it's make it very clear it's a business imperative. Here's why. Now let's talk about what we're going to do to put more money into the company's coffers, which then brings more money to us. So that's number one. Why me? I think now I've earned the right. I mean, I have a lot of I've worked. I talked about the brand. I've worked on my brand to the point as have others who are doing this, to the point where people will listen to us. So I'm not just, this brother from South Central LA who happens to, sort of want to just sort of make sure that all boats rise. When I talk about the business imperative, when I talk about the social imperative, when I talk about how SAP, if we really want to continue to be a dominant and strong company, we need to be the employer of choice for all, not for some, but for all. These things are important and people listen. So, I think over time, you have to build your brand. You have to build, earn the right to be able to talk truth to power, where people will listen to you because because they know that you are authentic, and you would not sort of take them down a path as you have never done before. Everything that you've told them before, you've done right by the company. Now this is the right thing to do, and many people will follow. So I think at all levels of the company, there are individuals who need to drive this message, and I happen to be at a place in the company where that I have access to people who will listen to that. Our CEO will listen to that very, very directly, and he's an amazing person to understand it, internalize it, and then back my play, back our play, and trying to drive and make the company better.
Excellent, excellent. I said those were the last two questions. I have one more question. How can people find out about positions at SAP?
Yeah, so there's sap.com/careers is where our careers and all the opportunities across the world exist. And we also have a talent community, and I'll get that to you. I'll actually get it to, maybe if you post it out there. And the talent community is where you could sign up at any level, and it allows you to share your interests and what type of roles where your passion and core competency intersect. And there's a little, sort of machine that will sort of send you opportunities, so you don't always have to be out there. But from internships to early talent to professional level, our executive searches are done in a different way. But there are lots of positions for, again, 25 industries, 11 lines of business, any background out there. If you're good at your craft and you want to sort of expand in a global company that can take you around the world and back, SAP is a phenomenal company, and I'd ask that check us out. And as we talked about, check us out too. We're checking you out, you check us out, and I think you can build a rewarding career with us. Yeah. Excellent,
excellent. Brian, I definitely want to thank you for allowing us to interview you and gain some of your fantastic wisdom, your knowledge. Thanks for all the nuggets of wisdom that you gave us tonight. I also want to thank our sponsors, Salesforce, for sponsoring this tech talk, much success to you. And then I want to say thank you once again. And yeah, that's it for tonight.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it.
I want to give a quick shout out to Nitzel Manuals, who made this happen. Thanks, Nitzel. Another
definitely
SAP advocate. And thanks, Greg. I greatly appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks a lot, and take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
So that's it for this episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Once again, thanks to our guest Brian Reaves. And if you want to send us comments or suggestions, send those to us at contact@blacksandtechnology.net. We will have the show notes up on the site as well as the video. And just stay tuned and listen. Check out our website for another episode coming up soon. So thanks a lot and have a good night.